Today is the opening of the New Hampshire presidential primary filing period. It's a tradition that will bring every presidential candidate into a small second-floor office at the State House in Concord over the next few weeks. According to our political unit, very little is required to register for the New Hampshire primary. All it takes is a declaration of candidacy and either $1,000 or 100 signatures to get on the ballot. The Associated Press reports that a Connecticut man was actually the first to register for the primary. In 2016, Mark Stewart Greenstein jumped into the Connecticut River as an effort to attract attention to his campaign, but he only finished with 29 votes. The latest poll from the University of New Hampshire and CNN show Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders actually leading in the state, but within the margin of error. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren is 3 points behind him, and former Vice President Joe Biden 3 points behind her. Alex Thompson covers the 2020 race and Elizabeth Warren's campaign for Politico, and he joins me now from the newsroom in Arlington, Virginia. Thanks so much, Alex, for joining us. So, according to this poll, more than half of New Hampshire Democrats, they're still undecided. They're trying to make up their mind who they'll support in the primary. So with that in mind, what's really the takeaway from this poll about the state of the race in New Hampshire?
Yeah, I think there are a few takeaways. One that you just mentioned is that this race is incredibly fluid, that a lot of voters are very determined to beat President Trump next year, and they really haven't decided. A lot of them haven't decided who they think is the best suited to do it. I also think that Bernie is still maintaining, in this case, a lead is really interesting considering that the man just had a heart attack 3 weeks ago. It shows that maybe it didn't hurt him as much as the punditry suggested. You need to remember that Bernie Sanders still has by far the most cash on hand and has a small dollar army that's going to keep him in this race. I also think that Biden went down 9 points in this last poll from the last poll that was taken by this pollster. So, you're looking at the possibility now for Joe Biden that he may lose Iowa and New Hampshire. And what does that do to his electability argument that he's the one best suited to beat Donald Trump next November? That's unknown. And if he ends up going down in both states, what does that happen to the rest of the field?
Remind us again, Alex, why is New Hampshire, the primary there, so significant in the 2020 race?
Well, it's always the first primary right after the Iowa caucus. And in this case, it often determines media coverage and quote unquote momentum. Especially right after the first primaries, what's happened is that candidates end up getting this idea of electability, this sheen from winning the first few contests. With that comes money and the resources to go to the really big states like California, Texas that are on Super Tuesday. So it's important both for media attention and for money in order to go the distance.
We're less than 100 days from the Iowa caucuses, and yesterday Bloomberg was reporting that nearly a dozen senior Iowa Democrats say Joe Biden is risking, and I'm quoting here, humiliating third or fourth place finish in the state. Is that something you're hearing as well? And what do you think the driving concern is right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing the exact same thing. It's very possible that Joe Biden could end up getting third or fourth place behind Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, all with strong operations in the state. Some people in the Biden on the ground in Iowa have attributed this to him getting in the race very late, just assuming that because he was a well-known entity that he could sort of come in. As a result, he didn't get a lot of the top-tier hires that a lot of the other campaigns snapped up at the very beginning of the race. They also have pointed fingers at his state director, who they say does not live in the state full time. And if you've ever been in Iowa, people really it is a 24/7 job in order to win that Iowa caucus. And it will be interesting to see if these reports in the face of these reports, the Biden campaign tries to recover or try to do a show of force, especially with a big dinner coming this Friday night in Iowa. But as you said, less than 100 days to go, and things not looking necessarily rosy in Iowa for Joe Biden.
And when you talk Biden, there's been a lot of talk also about him banking on South Carolina, which is actually the fourth nominating contest, and he's been referring to this as a so-called firewall. Will that really bank him enough delegates that he would need, let's say if he doesn't do well in Iowa or New Hampshire?
Well, because of their loyalty to the Democratic Party, black voters have disproportionate delegate power in the Democratic nominating contest. A lot of the very delegate-rich seats. And you have to remember, in the primary contest, it's not about how many votes you get, it's about how many delegates you get. And African Americans have a disproportionate effect on that. So far, Joe Biden is basically annihilating everybody when it comes to winning the black vote. The question, though, becomes if black voters don't think he is as strong as Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or Pete Buttigieg, do they stick with him? Their support isn't just because of his loyalty to Barack Obama, but also because a lot of black voters are thinking pragmatically in that the best way to beat Donald Trump is to elect a known entity like Joe Biden. And it's unclear if their support will stay with him if he starts losing.
And meanwhile, your colleagues at Politico have a new story about how the Bernie Sanders campaign is really banking on Latino voters in order to win the nomination. What is it about Sanders' campaign strategy that's earning him the support of these Latino voters?
Well, I can tell you that the Bernie Sanders campaign in some ways is haunted from their experience in Nevada in 2016. If you remember, they almost won in Iowa. They really killed Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire, and then they went to Nevada and they narrowly lost because they had poor organization and poor outreach to the Latinx community. They are certainly making a huge effort to reverse that this time. They were the only top-tier candidate to be at the LULAC Forum this past week. And I think they recognize that Nevada, if they're going to lose this nomination, it's not going to be because of Nevada. It's not going to be because they made a lack of outreach to the Latinx community. Also, you just saw that AOC endorsed him. Obviously, one of the most high-profile Hispanic lawmakers in the country, and she's expected to go to some of these Super Tuesday states or some of these early states with him in campaign and attract big crowds. And the Bernie Sanders campaign thinks this is demonstrative of what they're trying to create, which is a multiracial working class coalition. We'll see if it works, but it's certainly a little bit of a correction from their approach in 2016.
As Politico reported, Latino turnout has increased more than any other ethnic group when you look at the numbers from 2014 to 2018. How big of an impact would a similar jump have if that same number were to take place, let's say, in 2020?
It's going to be a huge, no matter which way you cut it, whether or not it's in, the general election in New Mexico, in Colorado, in Nevada, all across the West, but also in places like North Carolina, the Hispanic community, and in also pockets of Iowa, in this primary, the Hispanic vote is going to, if not be, determinative, is certainly going to be a huge factor. And, in order to, I think every campaign is trying to bolster its outreach efforts, make sure that its Spanish language websites don't have typos, which was sort of a regular, faux pas in past campaigns. But the campaigns are really making an effort to try to show they're serious and not just check a box.
All right. And before we go, though, I want to ask you, Joe Biden gave an interview to the Washington Post on foreign policy and on the president's decision to actually leave troops in Syria in order to control oil fields. Biden had this to say, and I'm going to quote here, "It's like dealing not with a commander-in-chief, but with a whiner-in-chief. It's bizarre." We know President Trump likes giving political opponents these nicknames. Is this the sort of similar strategy Biden's trying to engage with Democratic voters here?
It's an interesting point because I'm not sure if it's strategic or if it was just a moment. I think we'll probably find out in the next few days. But as we've seen, when anyone tries to get into sort of a name-calling contest with Trump, it's usually a contest that the president wins. He is unafraid to go places that a lot of his opponents are afraid to go. And, I think Joe Biden has said in the past that he feels that, you have to be tough but not get in the mud with President Trump. And I sort of wonder if this is a strategic approach or if it's just sort of a one-off, him getting a little bit frustrated as things have maybe not gone as well and as President Trump has attacked, members of his family.
I want to thank you very much. Alex Thompson joining us from Politico. Thanks again, Alex.
Thank you.